Hi, and welcome back to King Po Myers. I'm Ariadna.
And I'm Dylan.
And we are back, of course, another beautiful Friday over here. And today who do we have today?
We have Mr. Jeff Carter. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. We're super excited to have you on board. You reached out to us what feels like forever ago, but it was probably right around Halloween, right before Halloween, I want to say.
Yeah, I think I was trying to get the word out about my Halloween collection.
Exactly. And we got so excited that we were able to be, first of all, one of the first people to read it, of course. I got my hands on it. I'm like, oh my God, this is so exciting because I love Halloween. I don't think as much as Dylan, to be honest, but we've talked about that before. I feel like he takes the lead, sorry. But yeah, we got really excited to hear from you and see those stories. So we're definitely going to dive into that and so much more.
Awesome.
So before we get into those amazing stories, can you tell us a bit about yourself as a writer, as a person?
Sure. As mentioned, or actually maybe not as mentioned, as we were talking about before we started rolling.
Exactly.
Like Dylan, I also came up in New England, and I've been a diehard Halloween head for as long as I can remember. And I've been writing for a long time, and a lot of my stuff trends more towards genre fiction, towards horror and sci-fi and fantasy. I also like to write action, so sometimes that can be, challenging to fit into the horror genre, but I try to fit it in where I can.
That's pretty cool. Especially the action part. I wasn't expecting action. Well, maybe a little bit. Depends on which story, actually, if I think about it. But yeah, definitely New England boys.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from a tiny town in Connecticut called Madison.
Okay.
And I don't expect you to have heard of it. Connecticut, at least, and I think this probably holds true for Massachusetts as well. Connecticut is almost like a pointillist picture, where it's like a billion tiny dots, and it's only when you like pull back that you can see that it's a state.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look close, it's all these tiny towns that no one has ever heard of. And it's so,
it does remind me of Dylan.
it's so bad that at a certain point, when I hear someone from Connecticut, I usually don't bother to ask them where they're from, and I don't tell them where I'm from, because the chances that either of us have heard of those towns is almost zero. And this just happened the other day, where someone was like, "Oh, Connecticut, I'm from Connecticut. Where are you from?" And I told them, and they just kind of gave me a blank look. And I was like, "Where are you from?" And they're like, "Oh, I'm by such and such. It's near such and such." I'm like, "Well, that wasn't helpful, because I've never heard of either of those."
Yeah.
Isn't the story of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I came from a small suburb, but I mean, I met people in towns next door, and they're like, "Wait, where are you from?" The town next door. I mean, my town. What I would tell people is, you ever heard of the Boston Marathon? Yeah. Well, I live next to the town where the marathon starts. That's our claim to fame.
Right. I'm like, ever heard of Mystic Pizza? It's an hour from there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you know where they build the nuclear submarines in Groton? I can get there by car.
I actually do know where that is.
Yes. Well, I mean, Groton is like a major
are we close to Groton? I don't know.
Yeah, I've actually had a friend or two work at that naval base. So
look at that.
Yeah, that's like a major hub in the state. You've got your Hartford, you have your New Haven, you have places like Groton, and then anything else, and you're basically in Maine or New York. You end up veering off in Long Island.
Exactly. I remember, also quick random side note, because I'm from all over the place. I was born in Latin America. I was raised here. I moved to Spain, and we met in Spain through a mutual friend. And he was telling me the stories of like, oh, I'm from so and so here in Massachusetts and whatnot. It's like I would have never heard it. And like anytime that he would get asked, of course, back in like whenever we lived in Spain, he's like, I'm from Boston. It's like I'm not gonna tell you even the town because like why would you even know?
It's so much simpler.
Right.
I'm from
Yeah.
Boston. Period. I'm like, that makes sense. That does make sense. Like
I
that must be
went
really
to
annoying.
it's just kind of normal. I mean, it's just par for the course for New England. It's like I said, it's a lot of rocks, it's a lot of
Yep.
trees, and it's a lot of little micro towns, which is kind of part of its charm.
It is though.
You know,
Mhm.
It
lots of
is.
small, quaint towns surrounded by gorgeous trees.
I'm curious to know how your Halloweens were up like with when you were growing up actually, because there probably must be somewhat similar to his, which is just amazing.
Yeah.
Just like fall leaves, trick-or-treating, pumpkins everywhere, apple picking. Oh my god, yes, please.
Yeah, pretty much nailed it on the head right there. And as a side note, I went to college in Boston.
Okay.
So I have a great fondness for Boston and Massachusetts in general. And a lot of my best friends are from Massachusetts, oddly enough.
Makes sense though.
There you go.
That's so sweet.
When was the last time you were back?
I have not been back since I went to my best friend's wedding, which was in Connecticut, but my wife and I had an opportunity to fly into Boston like the day or two prior, and it was a Boston summer, which can be just a beautiful thing. And I actually got to show my wife like my old college campus, and
That's really cool.
That's so cool.
take her on a duck boat tour, and go through Copley Square and Boston Garden, and show her all the history, and we did like the walking tour and the Revolutionary War stuff. Like
Mhm.
That's so awesome.
Boston can be really magnificent. It can also be really hot and swampy because it's essentially built
Yeah.
on a swamp,
Yeah.
which is great. But better than bringing her there in the winter, which is just unforgivingly brutal. Man,
Agreed
those
to all of
Boston
the
winters.
above.
Yeah. Yeah, this weekend we're getting a negative wind chill, so that's gonna be fun for this.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's always
And
fun when you're trying to shovel the driveway in the wind chill. When I was in school, the Big Dig was still going on.
Oh Jesus.
what's the big dig?
Ugh. Essentially, as I remember it as a kid, it started and ended every news broadcast. Essentially, Boston built like it was highway, it was the bridge, it was the underground, and they hired con men, and it took 4 times as long as it was supposed to, and it was always like, well, today's news on the Big Dig, we're still screwed. We're still just throwing money at this pit, and it's never going to be finished.
Is it Spain?
Kind of. It took forever.
They had this major piece of the infrastructure. It was like a highway that went over a bridge, and they thought, what if we dig a giant hole and put all the traffic underneath and run it through a tunnel? Which is a great idea, but it cost like $1 billion and took them more than a decade, I think. And that was like just always there. It was just the Big Dig, and it was just a fact of life. But when I went back years later, that was actually completed. And I remember driving under that tunnel, and I was like, what's happening? Oh my God. And like, we're getting sucked into the earth. So that was like wild and terrifying, being on like a 20-lane superhighway that's going under the ground. But also because they had disassembled all those gnarly old bridges, it opened up all this green space and all these parks. and it reconnected the North End, which was this really old part of Boston that is their little Italy, with the rest of the city. So it used to be this like gangrenous appendage that had been like cut off from blood supply and was slowly rotting. And you'd walk into some of these stores and they'd just be like, I guess they're laundering money for the Boston mob, because I don't know how any of this stuff can stay in business. And like, I remember walking to this place, all the shelves were half empty, all the food was expired and covered in dust, and it was just gnarly. Like, this is not that great. But going back to this revitalized North End, it was romantic and beautiful, and I think
Yeah,
like
that's how I know it.
yeah, like the city's oldest cemetery is there, and there's a place where they used to hang pirates. Like, freaking awesome.
Boston is one of a kind.
It really, really is. We moved back in 2019 from Spain, and we didn't have much time to see it. Because I mean, even if you grew up here, you barely went to the city when you were growing up.
Well,
because
I did all like he said when he took his wife. Like, you do the duck tour, you go on all the trails, and it's just history. You go to
You-
Boston for the history.
you
yeah,
eat baked beans.
definitely.
Yeah,
And then we wanted to see more of it last year, of course, 2020, but here we are. So hopefully
Yeah,
at some point of
Yeah,
life, because I love
not
history.
gonna pack
but-
into the tea during
Yeah,
COVID.
no, I'm fine. Thank you. It's like we're staying in the suburbs, we're safe, we're healthy, which is good. But we're at least I am. Well, I think we both are because we both love history. Excited to like see more of it before we move, because that's a whole different thing.
and I think the duck tours, I think those are gone.
Hmm.
I think someone was killed accidentally, and then
I was not
it
expecting
brought up a
that.
whole thing because they're actually like old World War II or something.
They did something different to them, because when I went there, I feel like it was forever ago, but late 2019, I read like they have these tours that
The duck tours.
yeah, exactly, but on the ground, like on
Oh,
like around the city. They don't really go in the sea or anything on the ocean. You know what I mean? Like
interesting.
they go to
So
certain spots. I think that's what they
I remember it being a big news story that there was a duck boat that sank. For people that don't know, like Dylan was saying, duck boats are these World War II amphibious landing craft that can drive around like giant jeeps, but they're also watertight. And so you can cruise around through the Boston Harbor and the river and stuff. Although there was one that was not watertight, it drowned and it took a lot of its passengers with it.
I had no
So it was
idea.
pretty horrific, and it was a pretty big blow to the duck boat industry. But I guess they got it sorted out because, like I said, I went about 6 or 7 years ago, and my wife and I did go on a duck boat tour, and we did breathe in the diesel fumes of this
I don't know
gnarly
if I want
old
to go anymore
vehicle.
on a duck tour. I've never been, but
I mean, when
I
you
don't know.
when you explain it like that, it's like this is the most Boston thing ever.
That is, though.
We put our tourists on World War II old naval devices, diesel fueled. Will it sink? Will it no?
And if you do, if anyone knows about the water in the Charles River, it's pretty deadly stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
it's yeah.
We still
it's
want
probably
you
a
to
lot
come to
cleaner now than it
Boston,
used to
though.
be. Yeah.
Boston is still a must, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that said, if you can swim,
You're
you
fine.
can jump out, and I think they might even give you life rafts now.
I would hope
maybe,
so.
maybe that's an upsell. Maybe you got to pay extra for the life raft.
Oh
In
my
Boston,
goodness.
probably.
Oh my god. So going back to like Halloween from Connecticut
Halloween.
and
Halloween.
Massachusetts, Halloween, of course. How was it like for you? How did your love for Halloween come about?
It's always been there. I don't remember, a switch being flipped one day where I didn't like it, and then I caught the bug. I think I've always been into imagination and monsters and play, and getting to dress up in a costume is cool. but a day where everyone dresses in costume, that is amazing. It's like entering a fantasy world. All the rules of normal life do not apply, and you're just allowed to go up to anyone's house and they have to give you candy. And like people celebrate monsters on that day. I mean, really, I don't know as a civilization if we've ever come up with anything half as awesome as Halloween. Maybe a close second would be beer or Reese's peanut butter cups, but those things all fold naturally into Halloween. So
Yeah.
it's really the
They
best
really
of all
do.
worlds. Yeah.
I mean, first of all, thank you for those promo audiobooks. I started We Bleed Orange and Black last night, and I was reading it, listening to it today at lunch and anytime I really could. I mean, I love that book so much because it reminds me of Halloween when I was a kid. Like, for me, Halloween is just magic. And what I love about your story is I just feel that. Like, I didn't feel like it was the end of January. I felt like it was the middle of October. I felt like that sense of Halloween. I mean, is it just your experiences, or like just is that how you tap into it?
Uh, I'm really glad that it was able to transport you that way, because as I kind of get into in the foreword for the book, I had the sneaking suspicion early 2020 that Halloween was going to be, canceled, or if not canceled, a lot of people weren't going to be able to celebrate it the way they normally would. I knew I wouldn't be able to. I knew a lot of kids wouldn't be able to. And so I actually kind of put all my other writing plans on pause and really dedicated myself to writing a love letter to Halloween and getting it out by October, so that people who couldn't do all the things they love to do could still celebrate and reminisce and enjoy that Halloween spirit.
That's really absolutely well said, because that's really what it's a love letter to Halloween. Um, did you have a story that, I mean, all of them are wonderful, obviously, but did you have one that maybe I was thinking like, is this Jeff? Did something similar happen to you, or is these just all out of your imagination?
So many of these events are ripped from my own life. There's a part in the story on Full Moon Halloween with the teenage werewolf. I will neither confirm nor deny if I'm a teenage werewolf. But there's a part where he's headed out to a Halloween party and he gets egged. And that's like the first time he really starts to wolf out with rage. And so much of that story is about your expectations and wanting Halloween to be awesome. And when life gets in the way of you trying to enjoy Halloween, and just how it hurts so much more and it makes you so much angrier, that this like once a year special time, which is even more special for a werewolf because it's the only time they can really go out and be someone else. Like a werewolf has to become a wolf, and they have to hide who they are and what they are. But on Halloween, you can be anything you want to be. So you can be a Ghostbuster, you can be a fairy, you can be a Power Ranger, and it's your choice, and you get to express who you are, not this curse or not even your mundane everyday life. And so he's headed out to this Halloween party, and he's so excited, and he gets egged. And that literally happened to me. I was in probably my most ambitious Halloween costume ever, which is saying something, which was this giant Grim Reaper getup that I built. It was like a 2-story tall Mardi Gras style walking Stiltman Grim Reaper. And like
Wow.
this thing was nuts. I don't think I'll ever make or be able to wear something this heavy, clunky, complicated, awkward again. But it towered like 5 or 6 feet above my head. And then I had this like this backpack sort of exoskeleton and these big PVC poles on casters so I could walk and roll. And then when I extended it, I would pull those poles up and lock them into place. So it was, like
Wow.
That is
12, 13
impressive. Sounds
feet
like
overhead.
cosplay more than an actual costume.
It was really intense. And I was walking along. So, I was in this giant, 2-story tall black Grim Reaper cloak, and I could like sort of see through because it was like black crepey fabric. But I could only sort of see. And of course, the giant skull was like hitting tree branches, and I had to like duck and getting buffeted by the winds and stuff. And so I was relying on my friend to guide me, but he had made this like octopus costume that just had tiny slits under the eyes for him to see through. And he wears glasses. So he was literally like the blind leading the blind. And we decided to go to this Halloween carnival. And so we ended up parking like a mile or more away. And we're just like on this epic journey to get there. And I feel this like this wetness, like something hits me in the back, and then something wet runs down my back. And he checks it out, and he's like, "Oh, it's eggs," because there was a car of teenagers driving around. And they're like, "Oh, it looks like that guy put 100 hours into his costume. Let's throw eggs at it."
I hate people.
And then
My
to
heart.
make matters worse, when I got to the carnival itself, I'm walking along, I'm lumbering, it's very top heavy to say the least. I'm sort of blind, but I'm in what's essentially like a roving parade. It's kind of like, a Mardi Gras crowd. You're just all headed in one direction like a stream. And I've got these giant skeletal hands that I built on the end of aluminum crutches. So if I held my arms all the way out and then I held the crutches all the way out, then I had this like giant wingspan.
Mhm.
So, I'm kind of like this one-man party float, and, being suspended by my, puny human legs. And there were a couple people that came up and shoved me really hard in the back and tried to push me over. Now, luckily, I was able to catch myself, but like if I had fallen onto people within this big like PVC contraption swinging these, giant plastic and aluminum crutches, like I could have tripped and hurt a lot of people. So, I don't like to dwell on the negative, but that is something that definitely went into that werewolf story.
That angers me so much.
I
I don't like people.
No.
Was the rest of the night good at least? I mean,
The entire night was great.
okay.
Okay, that's good.
Because I didn't fall over. The costume was a big hit. Even the getting egged, like, you could throw as many eggs as you want at a 2-story black cloak. It's not showing up. It's not soaking through. And I was wearing like shorts and t-shirt underneath because I knew I was going to be working hard. So I was going to be like grubby and sweaty underneath anyway. So it made no never mind.
That's good at least. You still had an awesome night.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
good. It's a random, interesting anecdote. And I love that you put a positive spin to it within the book itself and did the whole werewolf kind of deal. You reminded me with the werewolf and now the story even more. One of his favorite movies, Trick or Treat.
Yes.
That scene, the whole first he said werewolf, and I'm like, oh, I totally understand that. And I don't know. We saw Trick or Treat twice last year, of course we did. And then you said more about Mardi Gras kind of party, and I'm like, yep, there you go. I could see it.
Whatever happened to that costume?
I was like, okay, here are my notes on how to make it better, more stable, bigger. I put some like LEDs in the giant skull.
Nice.
I was like, I'm gonna make it better. I tried to like create an amplified voice, but at this carnival we went to, it was so freaking loud that no one could hear me anyway. So I had all these plans to, improve it, but the only place you could wear that costume was outdoors or to an outdoor event because it was so large. And in following years, either the weather wasn't good or no one wanted to go to that carnival with me, or we ended up going to indoor parties and stuff like that. So I would wear, different, I sort of suit my costume to the event. If I know I'm going to be going to an indoor event, I'm not going to build some big crazy thing. And the years went by, and I was like, all right, well, maybe we'll make a short film, and we can use this modified version of the giant reaper in that. And it didn't happen. And then the cloak started to get progressively nastier, as its old eggs and spider webs kind of festered in the corner of the garage. And then we moved, and you're like, all right, I guess I don't need this part of it or this component. And so I've still got the skull and the giant skeleton hands, and that's all that remains of it.
Bring it back. I want to see this,
especially
baby.
weather pending, because you don't live in New England anymore. You live in sunnier weather for Halloween.
2021 does open up and Halloween is back, maybe that's the way to really celebrate.
Do you still get dressed up? COVID aside, of course, and 2020 aside, in general, do you still get dressed up for Halloween?
Always.
I like that answer.
Always have.
We do too.
Always will. There was a few years between like high school and college, those awkward years where you're not trick-or-treating, but you don't have any parties to go to, where Halloween was kind of a dud. But then once I started getting access to Halloween parties, then I was right back in it again. And now that I live in Los Angeles, in a typical year, there's almost too much Halloween stuff to do. There's too many events. There's interactive theater, there's haunted houses, there's haunted theme parks, there's great parties. So, it's almost spoiled for choice.
I definitely agree. Not that we have had that experience just yet, but I do know a lot of people in LA, and that's a big part of where I also work. So, and people who love Halloween like I do, I'm like, oh, let me find all the things. There's so many things to do, which is pretty cool. So you may not have the New England leaves, but I'm like, hey, you have so many other things, and you can actually wear a costume that, well, you don't have to, what's it called? Depending if it rains or if it's too cold or etc.
Yeah, I was a little nervous about moving out to Los Angeles because I was like, the leaves don't change, and you're not going to get cider, and it's not going to be all spooky and awesome. But I was surprised and delighted to find out that a lot of people who suffer from an excess of imagination and creativity have moved out to LA to make their fortune, and they all love Halloween just as much as I do. So LA does Halloween very well.
They do, and I'm so excited to see that one day.
Yeah, she told me that this past Halloween, and I had absolutely no idea that LA really got into the holiday.
Scene, yeah.
I'm just such a New England boy, because for me it's not like I love Halloween, but it's so used to being with the rustic New England feel. You have Sleepy Hollow and just kind of that feeling. I can't describe it, but if you're from New England and you watch all those old movies, that's Halloween to us.
That's your book basically come to life.
Exactly.
Literally. That's what we felt.
And then I think of LA, I'm like, that's palm trees and the beach and suntan lotion. It's not Halloween. I need to experience LA Halloween.
You'll love it.
Yeah, when you are inside the confines of a theme park and it's all decked out for Halloween and you're huffing that sweet, sweet fog juice and there's guys with chainsaws, running out of the shadows.
That's all I
know,
want.
yeah. You're pretty much in it. You're not like, oh, there's a beach, 10 miles from here. This isn't Halloween. And the sad fact is that, most people never go to the beach anyway. You can be pretty close to the beach and never actually get down there, kind of like you can be close to Boston and never go on that duck tour. Like,
yeah, exactly. But I think I grew up in Miami, and I grew up in obviously Miami. I was born in Venezuela. I lived in Barcelona. We have the beach right. I mean, luckily I'm one of the few who adores the beach so much that I do make a constant effort of going, and I love the sea. But ask anybody,
effort.
Yeah.
It requires constant effort
to go.
To get out there. Yeah.
You ask someone from Miami, you ask someone from Barcelona, someone who's who lives with a beach city. No, it doesn't. No.
Then you have the kid from Boston who is like, oh my God, a pool and it's sunny out.
Him in Miami.
Her brother thought I was a total moron. He's like, I have never once been in our pool. Why are you in the pool? I'm like, it's hot.
We went
Stay in the AC then.
When did we go? We went in June 2019, of course, but still. And he was just having the time of his life in the pool. And my brother's like, I'm never outside. And he's from Miami from forever. It's like, I just go inside the AC. I don't even go to the beach. He does not like it at all. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, so more to your point of you don't think that the beach 10 miles away. You're just being chased by people with chainsaws. And the lights, they have I forgot the name of it, and I know we're gonna go continue talking more about your book and stuff like that, but they have it's definitely not the Festival of Lights, but they have a bunch of pumpkin.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge festival. I have to go. I'll search it in IG and I'll definitely tag that festival down below in this episode. And I'm madly in love with it. It's just a whole
there's the Nights of the Pumpkin.
Yeah.
And if I could nitpick a little, part of the LA Halloween experience is that your pumpkin may only last a day or two in the heat.
Yeah.
So what I do is I carve half a dozen pumpkins. And I always make sure I have something, that's fresh for Halloween night. But if you're going to try to carve hundreds of pumpkins or make giant displays of pumpkins, they use fake pumpkins for those.
But that makes sense though, because the smell would have been
awesome. A giant field of rotten pumpkins, yes, please.
Yes.
Okay, New England boys.
But there is a challenge in an artistry to working with actual pumpkin flesh, as opposed to what I suspect was laser cutters working on fake foam and plastic pumpkins. And you're like, wow, that's really impressive that you maybe ran these all through a laser printer or, something like that. But in Keene, New Hampshire is where they had the original pumpkin fests, and they use real pumpkins. That was something that they did for many years, and they built these giant Wicker Man style towers of pumpkins, and it's hundreds and hundreds of pumpkins. And then one year, vandals, this was around the time when they tried to reboot Woodstock, and the fans trashed it and stormed the stage and pulled down the lights. It was around this sort of mid-90s anarchy time that some rowdy people destroyed the pumpkin displays. And so Keene stopped doing it for a number of years, but they've since brought it back. So you guys are actually pretty close to an actual pumpkin festival, just so you know.
I'm down.
That's good.
I'm so down for that.
I who knows where we're going to be fall this year, to be honest, at this point of rate, because lots of changes. But we'll see.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
fake pumpkins. That disgusts me.
Well, I mean, it's like, oh my god, okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good story though. The first Halloween we were here, was it? I
Wh-
think the first fall. No,
When I
I
had
don't
to carve
remember.
yours for you
Well, you always have to carve mine
every time.
every single time, and we carve a lot. Well, he carves a lot. We have a lot, but I think it was the first. It wasn't really fall. We came to visit. I think it was 2018, and I've never covered a pumpkin. I've never had a New England fall, basically. And we were about to move. No, move. We were just here visiting, and we were here till I want to say the end of September that year.
Mm.
We carved the pumpkins so early, of course, and I remember like it was so hot still.
Yeah.
That it like lasted 2 days, basically. Something like that was the anecdote, kind of like. So even here, if you carve too early, it's still pretty hot.
Yeah, to get those dog days, it can be pretty rough on the pumpkins. Every year we have a large pumpkin carving party that we call Pumpkin Palooza. And
Love that so
we
much.
have categories, and we judge them, or people vote, and then we hand out these awesome trophies. In fact, let me show you this trophy because my friend sculpted it and it's amazing. Hold on, it's right
Oh yeah,
there.
definitely. Oh,
Please
so
do.
cool. I'm pretty sure it was the next Halloween that we were actually here as well. That was so hot. I remember because I wore that costume and it was really hot on Halloween. And you're like, oh my goodness.
So my buddy Ryan, little white balance adjust there.
No worries.
My bald, pale dome. There we go.
You can tell you're from New England.
Yeah. My buddy Ryan is a really talented artist, and he made these trophies.
Folks, the trophy, it's a skeleton arm, and the hand has a carved jack-o'-lantern in it, and it's all gold, and that's just sex.
That is pure gold. Never better said. You should take a picture and send it to us. We'll definitely put it with this episode, because
Okay.
that is an awesome trophy.
Yeah,
Your
so-
artwork as well. You reminded me because of
thanks.
the pumpkin, and we're so happy because we have, Sam is a good friend of ours, and she's doing a bunch of episodes with us this season. We're doing Supernatural with her. She told us about the one that she sent to you. We'll go with the cover art, and they're so amazing. We're like, Sam, like we need these in our lives. Like I know they're for Jeff, but she was making them, and I was seeing the process, and I'm like, he's gonna flip when he sees these. And I'll definitely make sure we'll add them to the episode to like give her kudos, because that's pretty impressive as well.
My jaw dropped so hard that I think I heard it click. I was like, oh, what's this? It's like a little ornament or something. And then I opened it up and I was like, oh, and I won't do it again because I'll dislocate my jaw. But like, I was stunned at how dope
They're so impressive. Exactly.
Yeah.
She made one also for us for our logo. We have Sammy who made the logo and Sam who made the ornament, just because they love us, basically. That was like how we started hanging out with them. And we saw those, and those were impressive. So both your friend Ryan's artist in general, that's why they reminded me of Sam, like, oh yeah, the ornaments. Well, that's pretty cool. The Pumpkin Palooza. Oh my god, I want to go. I want to have. I can't wait to have like parties like that. Please.
Obviously it got canceled this year, which was a real bummer, because for some people that's the only, some of our friends or friends of friends, that's the only thing they do for Halloween. Mm-hmm. And so they look forward to it all year long, and people really bring their A game and get really creative. But I also end up every year like running a sort of impromptu clinic on how to carve pumpkins, because there's always someone every year who's never carved a pumpkin before. And
I try, but I get like half in, and then I'm like, here you go, Dylan, I love you.
Yep.
The tools now make it so easy, but there's a learning curve to it, and what I love is that the simplest triangle eye, triangle nose pumpkin is just as classic as like the most elaborate 3D sculpted stuff that takes hours. And I've had people come to our party where they do origami beforehand and like weave it into the trellis of their pumpkin, stuff with like flashing lights and chemical reactions inside. And but give me a classic jack-o'-lantern anytime.
Absolutely.
That's definitely something that Dylan would say. I feel like he does the classic jack-o'-lantern every
Yeah.
single year because of that. He does a lot more. He does a bunch of other stuff, but like the classic one we always have
You
because
can't beat it.
I mean, if you want to scare off evil spirits, I feel like you need that classic jack-o'-lantern.
Exactly.
Have you carved a turnip?
I've never carved a turnip. No. What is that like?
It requires a little more precision, but it's actually very pliable. And its skin is a little more like flesh, for lack of a better word. So I was actually to do a little bit of detail work, and like I carved into it and I carved teeth, but I was able to like leave the mouth on the outside kind of stretchy. But the original jack-o'-lanterns were turnips because pumpkins are a New World crop. So they would put little coals in turnips and make those their lanterns to ward off evil. And so a few years ago, I tried carving a turnip, and I was like, this is awesome. And when they dry and they turn like little shrunken purple heads, they look dope. Yeah. So do yourself a favor, get traditional, carve a turnip.
I like that idea. I'm definitely going to do that.
We have talked about turnips before. We just have them more for like decoration as well, rather than carve them, I think.
I've never thought about carving one. That's a great idea.
That's the original. Well, he just said it. The original one was turnips.
I'm down. Very much down for that.
That's all the times I've taught what Halloween is to my Spanish students. And you're like, turnips. That's where it started.
It's really interesting to see how Halloween is catching on in other countries. Japan is really into it. And every country has their own take on it. And it was something I learned just this year actually was that they have this sort of tradition called mundane Halloween. And the idea is they wear a costume that has, this would be maybe considered poor form in America to have like a little name tag that describes what your costume is. But it's actually something that's like super mundane. It's like a little snapshot of something weird or annoying about everyday life, and that's your costume. So like there's one, with the guy whose like tie is like flying up in his face. Like he put some wire into his tie and it's in his face, and it's just like guy whose tie blows up in his face. Or like, guy waiting for subway who's, the tie always flies into his face.
Yeah.
And just like really clever little mischievous stuff that showcases creativity. And for me, that's really one of the core tenets of Halloween is just how much creativity is on display.
Mm-hmm.
And it's why it's kind of the holiday for misfits, I feel like.
I like that holiday for misfits.
Me
I like that.
too.
Trying to find this damn turnip.
Where's that turnip?
Let's see.
Oh, wow.
That's a good looking turnip.
That really is. That's so cool. You can't tell it's a turnip from the picture, but I love the way it's lit up. Oh, look at that. Oh my God, those teeth.
This thing has some chompers, folks.
Exactly.
Good Lord.
And the lips kind of curl up and stretch.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so interesting. And that's yours? You're the one you are very talented, sir. My goodness.
Just got to put the time in. Just got to carve those pumpkins.
I'm gonna let you both do that without a doubt.
Sorry about the dogs, folks.
Yeah, exactly. They're dogs. That's all we can say with that one. One try. One tries. I think they're calmed down now. Goodness gracious.
So what would you say, maybe in general, what helps enhance your Halloween experience? Do you like to read things? Do you like to watch things? Like you said, you have your pumpkin carving. Anything else?
I mean, there are sort of milestones. I like to pack as much experience as possible as I can. So there's a couple traditions I like to hit. Carving a pumpkin is a big one. Uh, if we're fortunate, we can have the party and see friends and all carve together. Um, but going out on Halloween night to a party or to an event or doing some kind of haunted house, something like that. Um, for me, it's often more about creating new memories than it is immersing myself in Halloween media. Um, I may not watch a new horror movie or a repeat of a horror movie because I'm too busy working on my costume and trying to find places to showcase that costume.
I love
Uh,
that so much. It's more about the experience itself, and that's very much me. I'd rather have
yeah,
experiences and memories that kind of way
yeah.
than to watch something over and over again.
Um, there's nothing wrong with having those touchstones, but when I am at my most fulfilled is when I'm problem solving on a costume, and I think it's really gonna hit and wow people and you know bring some of that Halloween magic to someone's evening. Um, kind of random, but we actually were able to go out on Halloween this year. It looked like it wasn't going to be possible. We did some of those drive-in or drive-through experiences, but then we found this open air haunt that was being thrown in an actual cornfield. So we drove way out, and we had the spooky corn maze
Oh, I love
Halloween
those.
experience, and we afterwards we were just grabbing a bite to eat in this like tent in the parking lot set up outside this restaurant, and it was like the first restaurant I'd been to this year, more or less. And I was in my Rick and Morty costume, which is pretty simple get up, just a lab coat and this like giant foam Rick head. And one of our waitresses was saying that she'd never dressed up for Halloween, but she loved Rick and Morty so much. And I was like, how have you never gone out on Halloween? Like, it's bad enough that you're stuck working on Halloween, but you've never gone out on Halloween. And like, she explained her whole story. She was from the Ukraine, and her father was like really strict and anti-Halloween. And so at the end, I gave her my costume because I've had it for many years and it served me well. But it made her so happy. And she's like, oh my God, this is like the best Halloween I've ever had. And it's like, I'm on hand sad. You're working and this constitutes as your best Halloween, but like I was so happy to like make someone's night on Halloween. Like that felt really special.
I adore that story. And coming from, yeah, I grew up here. Halloween wasn't really big in my family, so I don't really have a lot of stories of me dressing up as a kid. And then I moved to Europe, and we don't really have Halloween. Well, we do now, like you were saying before, like in Spain, we do celebrate it a lot more recently. But even growing up, we do have carnivals, so we do dress up in carnivals, even though it's not
Right,
exactly the
right.
same kind of get up, I guess, because it's nothing to do with monsters. And but like you said earlier on in our conversation, I love dressing up, and the fact that there's a night that where everyone dresses up. At some point of my mid-20s, I was like, I wanted to have Halloween party. So I was, of course, people knew me like, oh, you're from the States. Of course, you're going to have a Halloween party. And I'm like, of
Mhm.
course, like we have to. And I deck it out. And then, of course, we met and we both love the holiday. So we definitely do as much as we can. Every year's different, give or take, whatever happens. And we move around a lot, and we're still moving even more so in the future, but definitely
Mhm.
having like that spirit. And we start pretty early. We start like late August, early September, kind of having that feel as well. And just yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's too good to only experience for one night. Like you got to have that run up to it. Um just sort of a random anecdote about culture clash and Halloween, but this is something that this always makes me laugh. I had a client from Africa once, and one of my icebreaker conversations is, oh, what are you going to do for Halloween? And sometimes you'll get some really interesting answers from people. And she she immediately launched into this story about when she first got to America. Her friends or her coworkers invited her to a Halloween party, and so she got really dressed up, and she got a gift, and she did the proper thing, which was, when someone invites you to a party, you look your best, and you bring a present, and you're very gracious. And she opened the door, and it was just full of people dressed as monsters, and she
I had
threw
I,
down
I
she
had
threw
a
down the
hunch that was
gift
coming.
and ran home. And she eventually figured out what was going on, but she said that she hates Halloween, and so on Halloween she and her sister will bake a cake, turn off all the lights, and ignore the trick-or-treaters and just stay home eating cake. And I was like, that kind of sounds fun too. I mean, I'd rather go out, but to each their own.
But you eat cake at the end of the day, so it's still a
Yeah, at
sweet.
the end
You
of the
know
day,
what I
you
mean?
get some cake.
It's some sort of candy at the end of the day,
Right.
and you have all the lights off, which also, once
Yeah,
again,
exactly. Even spookier.
oh
Um,
my god,
but
you
yeah,
remind me of the scene from Mean Girls. Oh my god. Okay.
it's just wild how different cultures view Halloween and how it's catching on. And even in America, I feel like Halloween is kind of mutates over time. Maybe this is just the LA experience, but I remember growing up, it used to be a little more about scare factor, and now it's a little more about sexiness.
Yeah,
Um,
you remember when I referred to the Mean Girls
Hmm.
scene? I don't know if either of you watched Mean Girls.
Nope.
I didn't see it.
I've had a hunch, which is fine, of course. There's a Halloween scene, and the main character's actually from Africa, and it's her first time. She was always homeschooled. They moved to, I forgot where in the States. I think somewhere in California, but she has like hoity-toity, rich girls kind of deal.
Mhm.
And literally that's what happened. So she got all
Oh,
dressed up. She got really dressed. She actually did get dressed up, but she got dressed up like as a really, oh, I forgot. I have her like as a monster, essentially, with the teeth, with everything. And she went
oh,
into the party, and everyone was dressed up, but in a sexy way.
oh, it was the opposite
There
of
was
what
the
happened to my
opposite.
client.
Exactly. But
That's funny.
she's in high school, and it was her
Yeah.
first time. You know what I mean? She's like a junior or something in high school. So that's the scene that popped up in my head. You're like, yep, there you go. And you're right. It does get a lot sexified. We went to where did we go? What's Spirit? Spirit usually has really good range of Halloween costumes, but you still see
Mhm.
quite a few of those. You're like, eh.
I saw an article this year, and it was about the sexualization of costumes, which, on the one hand, don't get me wrong, that's like an awesome part of going to Halloween parties is the sexualization, because that's a type of dress up. It's a type of self-expression, and it's also a type of hedonism. It's something that's different that night as opposed to every other night. And so, if you were to get a bunch of witches together to celebrate Halloween, I bet you'd see some, pretty darn sexy costumes. So, that's not a problem. I actually really dig it. But this article actually showed a timeline of costumes for kids, and there was
Mhm.
something like it was like a bumblebee, and it was
Oh
like
God.
in the 70s and 80s, these kids bumblebee costumes were just like big, frumpy, round, inflated, cute little bee costumes. And then as they get closer and closer to modern day, like the hemlines start rising and they start getting tighter and more revealing. And it's like, oh, these are for kids. And that's You don't need a sexy
Yeah,
bee
no,
for a
not for a
kid.
kid. No, I understand the
No.
whole witch concept because I was a very sexy witch last year and I love it and I
Nice.
love that costume.
Nice.
That's just a lot of who I am, my personality and my Latinist that, that's just who I am basically. But when it
That's
comes
the
to
Carnival
kids,
coming out.
exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. Yep, that's a really good sentence to describe me. But for kids, I mean, come on, there's a line.
Yeah.
I know
No
there's a
need
lot
for
of
that.
I know there's a lot of cultural differences, and like that's a whole different conversation to have when it comes to little kids and like they're using bikinis, and because for me it's very normal because I'm Latin, and like in Spain it's normal because it's a very hot kind of country in general. Um, but one thing is that, and one thing is costumes. It's like the
Yeah.
toddlers and tiaras. I cannot stand at all. I'm like, how,
no.
why, okay, no, that's not
Yeah.
okay, kind of deal.
Yeah.
Reeling in a little bit because we have talked a whole bunch, so we can actually go in and kind of conclude our episode, even though like we adore talking to you because it's so nice hearing all these anecdotes. Going back to your books really quickly, what else is going on? Is there something else coming up to promote? What do you have in mind in store?
So Dylan was mentioning the audiobooks. So I did the Halloween collection, which was We Bleed Orange and Black, and I followed that up pretty quickly with We Bleed Red and Green, which was my holiday horror book.
Which is
And
also pretty incredible. And I wish we had more time to talk about Krampus because you have an anecdote as well, like in your forward and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that's so good. It's so good.
Thank you. But in terms of like more current stuff, is I was able to work with audiobook producer to turn those both into audiobooks.
Nice.
And so those are finally out. They didn't quite make it out in October and December as early as I would have liked, in terms of, trying to get a Halloween book out in October and a Christmas audiobook out for Christmas. But they're out now. So right now we're waiting on one of my earlier short story collections to get quality controlled. And so when Audible signs off on that, that's going to hit the Audible store. And I am working on a novel right now. I've been writing horror pretty much nonstop for 2020. And I'm getting back into the action side, the superhero side
Nice.
in 2021. But me being me, I can't stay away from the horror. So my superhero stuff is pretty dark. Probably darker than a lot of my horror stuff, actually.
Well,
Interesting. I feel
'Cause
like
you
it's
get that-
definitely up our alley. Well, definitely Dylan's alley, without a
Yeah,
doubt.
you get that sweet and sour, like because it's people being heroic and trying to face impossible odds. You can really up the horror stakes, as opposed to in a regular story where it's just regular people experiencing trauma. You don't get as much action. Find
Yeah,
that
we're
regular
both
people can't take as much abuse as
as
superhumans.
exactly. We're both big comic book fans, so we definitely understand exactly what you mean.
Mhm.
Real quick, I mean, now that you're working on a novel, is it difficult for you or is it easy? Or because I'm just thinking, I mean, your two stories are a lot of short stories and now you're going to a novel. Like, how is that transition?
I started writing, well, when I started writing, I never finished anything. I was so intimidated by trying to write a novel or write, hundreds of pages or thousands of words. And then I found out that there was this thing called flash fiction, and even to a lesser extent, microfiction, which is like 1-page stories or 2-page stories. And it's sort of its own skill to try to write something with the beginning, middle, and end, plot development, character arc, and payoff, and like land it all in one page.
Mhm. That
But
takes a lot of props.
but it's not as intimidating as wading into the jungle of like a 400-page book. So I sort of cut my teeth, as it were, with these shorter stories. And in my Halloween collection and my Christmas collection, those are all basically flash fiction or short story length. And I've worked that muscle a lot, but I've only written a few novels. And I do find that for me personally, juggling a larger cast and trying to maintain tension through a longer period is very challenging. And this novel I'm working on now has a lot of, for lack of a better word, world building. There's a lot of high concept stuff. So I needed to like figure all that out, how it worked, before I could even begin to plot it out, So it's tough, and you're going to spend a lot more time invested in a novel, than you would writing, dozens and dozens of short stories. But ultimately, the business of writing is the business of novels. So got to get back to it. Got to get back on that horse.
Exactly.
I wrote my love letter to Halloween, and now it's back to work.
Well, we're super excited, and we're happy to have you, and have you back on again, probably at some point of 2020. I want to say 2020. Thank God it's over.
Nope.
2021.
Damn right.
Moving onward and forward, please. But for sure, with everything else that you got going on, and there's so many other questions that we had in mind as well, but we love this conversation a whole bunch.
Thanks. I would be remiss in if I didn't mention that there's a VR game coming out this year. And I think we'd been emailing about it, in terms of projects I had on the burner. But I was able to write for this Lovecraftian VR horror game.
Ooh.
It's called Hush, in Search of Dominic Ward. And if you look that up on the Steam store, you can put that on your wish list, and they're going to have a new trailer up soon. And I love escape rooms, and I love VR. I love horror. I love Lovecraft. And getting to work on this project was like a dream come true. So I'm really excited for this to.
We'll definitely have the name written down or a caption down below as always. And do you know any dates when that's coming out?
I do not.
Right.
It turns out writing it was the easy part, and engineering all the actual VR stuff is much harder and much more intense. And the two leads on the project both had babies during quarantine. So that threw a little wrench or two in their schedule, but it should be coming out soon, and I will share all that info with you guys.
Definitely share it our way. Awesome. And then we'll definitely share it with our KPM fam.
Thank you.
Before we finish, the same 3 questions we ask everyone, and I feel like, I don't know if these questions are gonna be easy or difficult for you, Mr. Halloween lover. The first one is,
what is your favorite Halloween candy? Only one.
I'm going to go with candy corn because I ate Reese's peanut butter cups year round.
Damn right.
That makes sense.
Only eat candy corn in a very limited quantity in October. And it says Halloween to me.
Absolutely.
Like it's the colors of Halloween. It's the pure corn sugar taste of Halloween. It's sickly sweet, which is just encapsulates everything about this gaudy, bizarre, hedonistic ritual that we call Halloween. Yeah, candy corn for the win.
Love that. And describe Halloween in 3 words. A Muppet.
As someone who's written multiple books on the topic, I would say read my books.
I was gonna say that.
3 words.
I was gonna say that. Buy my book.
I, as a person who has read both books, and Dylan's basically on it, he already started. So yeah, I agree. We agree with buy his book and read his book. That's what Halloween is.
I'm usually not so mercenary, but
But I mean,
it's the
it's
only way I can encapsulate my profound breadth of thoughts and feelings on Halloween in 3 words.
exactly that. That was a good one. And where can we find you?
You can find me at jeffccarter.com, and I'm at Carter Wrote It on Twitter and Facebook. And if you look at Jeff C. Carter Instagram, you'll see covers for my books, some old costumes, lots of pumpkins, and maybe even some dogs and cats if you're lucky.
Nice.
Thank you very much for being with us today, Jeff.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely. And for our lovely, listeners of KPM fam, we'll be back next week as always.
See you then, guys.
See you then.